Hey animators, we're going to make something in 3D. We're going to use a program called Cinema 4D. There are many 3D programs out there. This is one that is included with After Effects, or at least a light version. We're going to learn how to do many things. This video that you're seeing playing right now has several things going on. There is a shape that we've built called a primitive. We have put textures or materials on it. We have put lights on it. The shape itself is being twisted. It's also animating, it's turning, and there's a camera move that's zooming in and zooming out. And then there's a background there as well. And then we have to export it. So there's lots of steps that we're going to take to get here, but it's pretty neat once you get kind of the idea of what 3D can do and that you can build just about anything with it. And there's a lot of 3D in our lives, and it's nice to know kind of how to use it. So without further ado, here we go. This lesson is about Cinema 4D. This is a 3D program, so we're going to learn something brand new, but we have to access it through an old program, After Effects. We have a demo version here at school, so let's open up After Effects and create a new project. All right, within this familiar program, I know it's been a while, we need to make a new composition. And let's keep it 1920 by 1080. And we can call this Cinema 4D Training. This is the composition inside After Effects. We're going to have three things that we have to name. This is the composition. So I'm going to copy this because I know I'm going to have to use it again. Frame rate 24 is fine. Duration is fine. Background's fine. Everything else is fine. Hit OK. We have our scene. Okay. We need to create a new layer that's special, that's going to open up our Cinema 4D program. And two ways to do it is you can right click down here, or you can go to layer. Same menu, both places you'll have this new layer option. And at the very bottom, you'll see it's a Maxon Cinema 4D file. So when you click that, some things are going to happen. You're going to say, oh, well, it's making me save this thing that I just created. This is saving the 3D file. So this is a separate file. I'm going to paste because I already called it something new. I'm just going to put it on my desktop. I should see this new layer pop up here pretty soon. It's thinking. So you'll see Maxon Cinema 4D try to open. Depends on the version that you have on your computer. Also in After Effects, you should see an effect being applied. If you're asked to make an account, you can sign in with your Google account, and we should have at least a 7-day free trial. If not, there should be a light version. So it kind of changes all the time, but go ahead and sign in with the Google account and see how that works. I'm going to close this up because I already have Cinema 4D open, and I'm going to work a little bit differently. But right here, you have some options of how to work. You can see that your whole interface looks like it's an old Tron movie, and then you have a layer right here. So some things have happened, and we'll get to that. It should open Cinema 4D from this point, and the next video is going to be, or the next section is going to be about the interface and how it all works. But got to get to this point. If you ever need to open your Cinema 4D file, you can select your layer and go Edit Original, and it will open Cinema 4D for you. So that's another way to pop things open. Try to get to this point where you have a new layer, new composition. The last thing I'm going to do is file save. I have not saved my After Effects project, which is going to be the same name. Save it to my desktop. Okay, I'm ready to work. I have two files, Cinema 4D file and an After Effects file. I'm ready to rock in the next section. This is the Cinema 4D interface. Once you've opened your After Effects project and you've opened the Cinema 4D file, it'll open another program. So we have two programs open now, After Effects and Cinema 4D. We're going to work in this program, save our work, and it's going to update in After Effects. We've done that process before with other programs. Quick tour about what we're seeing right now. On the left, these are ways to modify shapes, and there's some kind of global tools that we may or may not use. Up here, you have some basic kind of ways to modify shapes or objects. Some ways to render your work. These are the main tools that we'll use here. These are where the shapes come from. This is how we modify the shapes, and then some cameras and lights and that sort of stuff too. There's a whole menu system here, and then there's another menu system up here. It may look different to you. Right in the middle, of course, is our frame. This is what we're going to be seeing. You should see this grid. You may not see these lines here, which we can turn off and on. On the right-hand side this is kind of like your layers. This is where all the art will be, all your assets. It'll start looking similar in a bit. And then these are the properties of whatever you have selected, basically. And this changes quite often. Down here, the last part is your timeline. So these are keyframes right here. You have a play button, and we'll also have a space for materials down here. So there's every little corner is packed with stuff. Okay, some basic navigation. So in 3D, there is an X dimension, which is the horizontal dimension, and then the Y dimension. Those are the two main dimensions that we're working with After Effects and Moho. We weren't really working with depth, so now we have 3 dimensions. We have the Z dimension. Down here, if you take a look, you can see there's a little tiny axis. You have an X, a Y, and a Z. And that will stay true to your format. You can also see those colors corresponding here. X, Y, Z. Okay, this is a perspective view. You may or may not see this word right here, but we do have other views. So with your mouse, I want you to click on the scroll wheel. It actually is a button. So you click on it, and you'll see 3 other views pop up. On mine, I see the top view. So if I'm looking down, the right view, and then the front view. So there's many other views. If you want to go into, let's say, the top view, I would click into that, and now I'm in the top view. So we can go in and out of different views if we want to, very easily, like that. The next navigation piece is how do we get around this kind of universe here? So there's keyboard shortcuts that you have to get down, or you can use these buttons here, but they're very slow. So the first one is a pan tool. So I'll do both. The pan tool is you click and hold this button, and you can see that I can move left and right. Okay, on my keyboard, I can press 1, hold 1, click and drag. Much quicker. The second one is zoom. So I can click and drag up and down and zoom in and out. Zoom. Or I can press 2, press and hold 2. Same thing. Zoom in and out. Okay. Third tool is orbit. If I click and hold that, I'm going to orbit around my scene, and things can get pretty messed up pretty quickly, but we can reset that. Don't worry about it. Number 3, hold that. I think it's way easier to do that. If you need to reset your view, you can always go to View, Frame Default, and it'll kind of go back to normal. Okay, that's navigation. In Cinema 4D, there are other things like scroll wheel. You can scroll wheel in and out. You can hold command and control and do a different orbit. So play around with some buttons, but I would either get these buttons down or make sure you press 1, 2, and 3 to navigate your view. Next, we want to add some shapes or objects to our scene. These are called primitives when you begin kind of creating shapes in 3D. They're simple, like cubes and spheres, but they're 3D, so they're not like boxes and circles. So they have that 3D look to them. I want to navigate to this part of my screen right here. Looks like a cube. And if I click and hold that, I should have a whole library full of different primitives. So these are kind of the beginner blocks of 3D. I'm still holding my mouse. If I let go over the cube, it's going to drop a cube in my scene here. Some things you'll see right now, and I'm going to use some navigation on my keyboard that we learned last. I'm zooming in, and I'm actually going to use number 1 to pan, number 3 to kind of rotate. Actually, like Option, command on a Mac, which would be Alt. Oh, probably Alt Control for you guys. We'll see in class what that is. So you can kind of see it. There are many different things to highlight here. And let's take a look at all of these. The arrows indicate that you can move this. So if I click and drag, let's say the green is the Y dimension. If I click and drag that arrow, I can move that in the Y dimension. I can also move it in the X dimension. I'm referring to my little widget right here. This is the X dimension. So I can move that. I can also move it in the Z dimension. So I can move it that. So I can move it however I want to. There's also these little corners. So if I wanted to move the whole thing in the both Y and X dimensions, I would grab this handle. You can see those two arrows highlight, and then I can move it in those two dimensions at the same time, but it's not moving in the Z dimension. So you have some choices of how you move things. Okay. You can also rotate. So we've actually been on this tool right here. Another shortcut to get down are the move, rotate, and scale keys. But you can also use these here. The move key is E on your keyboard. If you wanted to scale this, go ahead and select this tool, or T on your keyboard. You'll see the handles turn into boxes now. So these you can scale. And if you just grab one of these, it should scale proportionately. I can also scale using these handles. So that's one way to scale this thing up and down. I can also rotate. So R for rotate right here. If I click and drag this, you can rotate on every axis you want to. This is the Z axis, the Y axis, that's the Y axis. This is the X axis, or you can click and drag anywhere in this and just kind of free rotate it however you want to. Don't get too carried away because you do want to have some control over it. And right now I really don't know where this is. In 3D space, it's very confusing. So, but it's nice to kind of play around with it. There are other controls that you can see here. These little handles allow us to scale not in a proportional way. So if I click and drag this, you'll see that the cube, I'm going to zoom out, kind of rotate so I can see, I can scale this in a, this would be the X dimension. I can scale it in a Z dimension or the Y dimension. So I can make like a wall if I wanted to pretty easily. Okay. So through all of those techniques, we can do all sorts of things: scale, rotate, position, however we want to. Some other controls are found over here. So I'm going to grab my move tool. I'm going to deselect by clicking out here and then select it again. And these things start to change. Some shapes have segments. So this cube has segments. It only has one segment per side. The X dimension has only one segment. It's basically a box. But if I click this up one, it says 2 segments. I can't see anything that changed. So let's change the display to lines. Second one down under display right here, little tiny menu, it's lines. So you'll see that you'll start to see the geometry of your primitives. So you can add more segments. And why would we do that? You'll find out, but it's also going to help your shapes bend and morph more naturally. Without these segments, your shape is unable to bend. It's almost like having an arm without an elbow. So we can bend at any one of these intersections. So adding segments to a primitive is done over here. I'm going to just kind of move this guy out of the way. And I'm going to put another primitive in there, a sphere. So you can see a sphere has all these lines in there, same controls. I can click and then off click again, segments 24, I could increase that to 100. And now we have more segments. So this is going to be a more smooth sphere if you were to render it. Move this out of the way. and put a third shape in there. Oops, wrong menu. I'm going to put a pill shape capsule. Okay, this one has some controls where I can make it taller or skinnier. I can add more segments. I can add fewer segments if I want to. So practice navigating, kind of rotating around these things, zooming in, zooming out, panning, so you can kind of see things. It's just going to take some memory, muscle memory to do it. Once you've got that down, let's look at some different views. So I'm going to scroll, click, and look at different views. My top view, so I can see, I'm going to use my pan tool, same thing. You can see this is the camera looking down on everything. If I go to my front view, this is the camera looking from the front, like if my camera was right there. This one is looking from the right, which was a little disorienting, but kind of from here. So we can kind of see that stuff if we click out of there, but I'm going to go ahead and scroll click back in here. And I'm going to probably just delete these two. You just hit delete. You can select things by just clicking on them and hitting delete, or you can go over here. This is our layers palette, and you can select which one you want to delete. This is called the cube, and just hit delete. So let's be left with a capsule, and we are going to modify this capsule. Okay, so I want fewer segments of height, so I'm going to decrease that down to 1. And then I'm going to decrease the rotation segments, and then cap segments. So I have, I think that's cool. I have height segments of 1. I have cap segments of 1 and rotation segments of 1. So we almost have this like diamond sort of jewel shape now, just by modifying the original. Okay, and I can rotate around that. Let's rename that. So you can rename things by going up to capsule, double clicking, and call this maybe something like jewel. Hit enter, and there we go. Let's save our work. File, save, make sure you save often. Okay, and then the next scene is going to be about materials and how do we add a color and different types of materials to this, because it's gray, it's kind of boring. So let's add some cool, like, sort of textures and colors to the outside. This part's about materials. Materials are a whole subject in themselves, and we don't see where there's color or anything on our program. So we got to create some materials. Down here in this little kind of tray is where you put materials. So you have to create them. You can go create new material if you want to, or you can double click. It's the easiest way to do it right here. And it's going to create a new material. I'm going to double click that little sphere, and it gives you a preview of this kind of clay idea right now. Just going through, there's a lot here. So going through what you're seeing here, there's a name, so we can give it a name if we want to. There are all sorts of these different types of materials that you can apply to this one material. So I could have something that's color and something that's transparent, and I can put something called a bump map, which makes it look like it's got texture to it. I can add all sorts of stuff. And then every one of these, you can see this color one is highlighted. It has all of these options right here, and it gets very, very, very complicated. So if I go to like transparency, for example, it's not on, but I'm selecting it. And if I wanted that to be active, I would just click the checkbox, and now I'm showing transparency. So you just got to know, okay, if I have it selected, I'm looking at the options, and if I want it to be on, I have to check on. So I'm just going to do a basic one right now. So I'm going to uncheck transparency and anything else that's on, and we're going to work in the color. So we're going to get familiar with how to make a color and apply it and then change it. Okay, so we're here. I have a new material. It's on the color tab, and I have it checked, and that's the only one. I'm going to give it a name, and let's call this red, whatever color you want to make. All right, you have several types of color selection modes here. I prefer this one, spectrum. It's one I'm familiar with. If you want to paste in RGB values, or sorry, hex codes, it's possible to do that. So you might have to go into your preferences, but I prefer this way. The spectrum, picking a color here. All right. And then you can see that your little circle is reflecting what's going on there. There are other things like brightness. If you wanted to reduce the amount of light that is hitting your object, it's not reducing the color itself. It's still the same color, but the amount of light that would be absorbed in that object. Remember, we're emulating real 3D space here, so that's why a lot of these things don't really follow what we think they should. They are supposed to be emulating reality. There's other things you can play around with. You can add images and types of fall-offs and modes and stuff like that, but this is the basics, adding a color. So we have red. You can see our color is right down here. You can close this up, and you can apply this color to your jewel by simply clicking and dragging it on top of your object. And you can see it'll be kind of highlighted. Once you let go, your jewel is red now. There's a little tiny version of the texture over here indicating that you've applied this color to your jewel. So the jewel's here, and anything you add to it will be here. Okay, what if we didn't like our red and we wanted to change that red? Double click again. Let's make it blue instead. I'm going to rename it blue. Close it up, and you can see it automatically changed everything that was applied to that, every shape that had that color applied to it. So very easy to change things. Okay. Now there's other materials. Now you can really play around with materials, make things look like glass or metal or wood or all sorts of things. And we could go into that over days and days and days of it. Or you could open a library and modify things, which I think is a lot more fun. So let's try this. This is another way to find materials. Go to Window, and then we want to go to Content Browser. And this is the path that I'm in right now. And maybe we don't have the same path at school, but we can explore and find something, I'm sure. There are materials underneath this folder here, Broadcast. So this is just kind of a subset of presets that are given to us. And I'm down in Glass. And if I wanted to apply my glass to my object, I would click and drag it to my object. I'm actually not going to do that. I'm going to put it down in my materials tray so I can work on it. Okay, so I'm going to base a lot of my sides to off of this. This is going to be the original texture. Okay. When you double click this, you can see there's other things that have been turned on. Transparency, and you can control how transparent things are through the brightness. You can control what color it absorbs, or you can control reflectiveness. You know, what type of material, where is that at? I don't see it. What type of material you're reflecting. The bump map is the type of texture that's going to be on this thing. So lots to play with. I would encourage you guys to mess around with stuff. There's no wrong answer. But if you want it to look like mine, just try to follow what's going on here. Really, I'm just going to change some color. So I'm going to call this green glass. Okay. And if I drug this to my whole gem like this, it's going to look kind of green and kind of blue. And why is that? Right here, if I zoom in, I have a glass applied and I also have a blue applied. So it's probably going to look like both, which could be interesting. But I don't want that. I want this to look like stained glass. So I'm going to highlight that blue one and I'm going to get rid of it. Delete. Okay, this is starting to look transparent, but very odd. Let's see what this actually looks like, because this is just a quick preview of what glass will look like. It's not really the final look. So what we can do is we can render the view. And this is what I'm left with. Doesn't look very good because there's nothing else in the scene. There's no lights or anything, and the background's black, which I can control. Hit escape, here we are. But that's kind of the idea. We have a transparent material. I'm going to delete that glass. So we're back to gray. And what I want to do is I want to apply different color of glass to every side of this shape. Okay, so this will take a little bit of time, but once you do it once, you'll know, oh, okay, that's how you do it. So first I need to make my shape editable. Right now I can still control how many segments are in it, or all the sides and everything from over here. And it's treated as one object, but I want to actually break it up into parts so that I can apply glass to each face of the geometry. This button right here says make editable. And if you click that while you have something selected, it's going to change it. So those options are no longer there. And you can see the little icon looks different now. So that means this has been kind of sliced up into all of the different faces. It still can be controlled the same, but it's going to act differently. Okay, I would like to just select one of these faces. Selection tools. There's live selection, which is very handy. But again, when I click on it, it selects the whole thing. It's based on the mode that I'm in. And right now, I'm up here, I'm in the model mode right here. I'm selecting the whole model. I can, however, go and select different modes. Since I've broken this up and made it editable, I can select points. So let's go here. You can see that it changes, and I can select a point. I can move and rotate, modify, and model this piece of geometry if I want to. I'm just going to give you an example. I can move that out if I want to, make a very unique shape. Control Z for undo. I can also select edges. I can select an edge, pull that whole edge out. That's pretty cool. Undo. But I want to select faces, and I want to select this face right here. I'm going to click that face. I want to apply my glass to that face. So I'm going to click and drag. My glass has been applied to just that face. You can see the other faces are still gray. Let's see what happens if I render. All right, so now we have a glass look. Because there's something behind it, it can kind of be seen. Okay, I'm going to just repeat this process of making a new material, changing the color, and applying it to the different faces. So watch this once, and then you can watch the rest of it if you want to, fast forward if you want to, but it's just going to be a lot of repetition. I'd like to copy this. Okay, I'm going to, let's see, hold on a Mac, it's Command. It should be Alt for you. I'm probably wrong, but click and drag. You can also usually copy and paste or duplicate, but I don't see that here. So I have a copy of my green. I actually don't need this blue. I'm going to delete it. I have a copy of my green. So I'm going to make it change. I'm going to call it something like, let's see, let's call this blue glass. All right, it's still green, even though I changed the name. So I need to go in and actually change the color. So under transparency, you can see your color has been changed, similar to how we did the last material. And you can just drag your slider over here, and it should change the color. Make a significant change to it, and it should update. If the reflectance is also green, you may want to change that as well. And now you can see that that's getting more blue. So those two things you can change to really help it. Absorption color, you can try kind of fiddling around with that, but now it's more of a blue. So, oh, there we go. Finally, took a while to update. I can then, remember, you have to select the material, or we can actually drag it right on. If you drag it on the whole thing, it makes the whole model that material, which you don't want to do. You want just this face, so you have to select the face. Remember, you have the selection tool, and you have your polygon selection option, and you can drag and drop it from here if you want to. So now we have a blue and a green. I'm going to render that. That's looking pretty cool. I like it. Okay, I'm going to repeat that process. I'm going to make probably 4 to 6 different glasses, and apply it to different faces. My goal is to color the entire jewel so they all have glass faces. So at this point, you can fast forward to the end. That's going to be the end of this video, is when you have all of the faces colored, or you can watch it and do it along with me. Okay, here's the third one. I'm going to make this one red glass. Go into transparency, make it red, absorption color, red, reflectance, reddish. And that's going to update. It's going to take a little while here. Figure out which side I want to be red. Maybe this one. Drag and drop that there. It's taking a while to update over there, but you can see there's, if I rotate around, there's kind of a red tint to it. Double click again. Let's call this one maybe yellow. What colors you want to make? And select that one and apply the yellow one there. I don't know why this is not updating. A little bizarre why that's not working, but you can always render to see that it's working. And you can see there's, if I go to the top, yeah, so it's working. It's just not updating down here, which it will eventually. And you can make more. I'll probably make two more. I'll make a purple one. Purple glass, make that change. Select that big face, put that there. And then one more, maybe like an orange. So having all of your materials completed and then going through and coloring, again, is pretty easy. My computer crashed because I'm recording a video and trying to do some 3D software. So I'm just going to continue this process, making sure that I'm applying different colors to different sides. Orange. Try to add some variety. Maybe there's a pattern that you do. This will help you also navigate. To purple and blue. Okay, so I have all these colors right here that are being applied to these different faces. Oops. There we go. Just double check that everything's colored. Kind of rotate around, make sure everything looks like it's completed. And then you can try to render it, but it may not show up because it's dark. It's going to look like that. That's normal. Okay. Every face has a color. You've created new materials. You know how to make your own materials. So experiment. You don't have to do glass. You can do whatever you want to, but I do want a piece that has different materials on every face that looks like this jewel. We can't see this jewel because there's a problem with the light. There's no lights in our scene. And there's also nothing in the background so that light can bounce around. It's actually trying to render a realistic version of this using real world physics and how light bounces off of things. So we need to create a background and we need to create lights. So that's what this one's going to be about. Go to view and then frame default. This is a nice tool. This gets us back to kind of our origin. I want something behind that that's a big wall, basically. And there's a object within our primitives called a plane. This plane is just like a big old floor. And what we can do is put it in there and we can rotate it around to kind of place it behind our object. So I'm going to go into my 4 view here and zoom out on my front and pan around on my top. I'd like to rotate this in the around the Z axis, I believe. Press R for rotate. And then if I rotate the blue and hold shift, I can see it's going to snap to some degrees. 90 degrees would be great. Okay. Then I can rotate it here in my perspective view. If I hold shift, and I'm going to rotate it maybe 45 degrees. So that's going to work. This doesn't have to be perfect at all. It just has to be behind our object. I need to move it as well. So I'm going to grab my move tool, and then I'm going to move it. I can be in my top view, and I can move it back like this if I want to, something like that. So here's my object, and here's my plane. Also, right here, it looks fine. So I could do all of my moving in this panel if I wanted to. It just needs to be away from my object. Next, I need it to be really big. So if you're not seeing these controls, make sure that your model option is selected here. And then you should see these little handles, these little orange handles. I'm just going to make this really big. I'm going to zoom out and make this pretty large. There's one on the bottom as well. I'm just going to make it big. I want this big enough to where when I zoom into it, it's just going to fill up the whole background. Now this background can be whatever color and material you want to as well. I'm going to make a very simple colorful background. I'm going to double click, make a new material. This is my kind of my clay. I'm going to call this background. I'm going to turn off reflectance, turn off color, and I want this one to be luminance. This is not going to be affected by lights at all. It's just going to be a flat color. And pick purple or something like that. You can also play around with some gradients if you want to. It's kind of cool to do that. You could also load an image. Let's say you made a gradient in Photoshop and you want that to be your background. Totally can do that. But I'm just going to make mine simple. Right? Drag, drop. There we go. Now I'm going to render and see what this looks like. It's pretty interesting. If I were to zoom in and view this from a different angle, okay, I can see some of my colors coming through. Now this is glass. So just imagine glass trying to show you what color it is without any lights at all. There's no lights at all. There's nothing being bounced around. There's no particles of light. So we need to add a bunch of lights to this. And there's a lot to learn about lighting. So hopefully this isn't too complicated, but your goal is to make this light up, whatever way you can do. Save. Okay, so far all we have is a plane and a jewel. I'm going to add some lights. There's a light icon right here. If you click and hold, there are many types of lights. We're going to add a couple of these types. I'm going to do a spotlight and then a regular light. So first we're going to start with a regular light. And it puts it right in the middle of the scene. Okay, it puts it right in the middle of your actual jewel. So that you can see there's a light there now. Now you can see over here, there's all these different materials and these little tabs right here. So lots to try. You can add a color light. You can increase the intensity beyond 100% if you want to. You can make the light visible, like light rays and stuff like that, which is kind of fun. I like to turn that on. And let's see what happens when I just render this scene. Okay, so it's really blowing out everything. So it's way too bright. So I'm going to decrease that to 25. Control R, or sorry, Option R for you guys, or Alt R. So it's still pretty bright. Maybe change this to area and increase the brightness. This is a render window, which is really helpful. Let's see, I'm gonna play around with this. Let me turn off visible light, increase the intensity, maybe to 200. Okay, It's starting to get somewhere like that. So now we can kind of see in the shape, and there's some interesting things that are happening. It's the materials that have this kind of noise to it. You can start to see it. So to recap that, I put a regular light in there. I changed it around a little bit, but I left it with Omni. I turned visible light on and then off again because on was like super bright. So that looks pretty cool. We're starting to get there anyway. So now there's a light inside of your scene. Okay. Alt R will turn that window off if you want to, or you can render just a frame, Command or Control R. Okay, so you can start to see it. So often do that. You got to check to see how your choices are affecting your work. All right, I'm gonna add a couple more lights. This one's going to be a spotlight, and it's gonna put it right in the middle again. You can see, but it has a direction to it. I'm gonna zoom out. Actually, I'm gonna look at this from the top view. This light right here is pointing up, and I want to actually move it and rotate it a little bit, and then I'll change the properties too. Once I get one right, then I can kind of use this a couple of times. So I'm going to pull this back. Actually, I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees. And then I know, pressing E, I can move it back. And I'm going to kind of have it shine through the glass. Let's see if that works. Some other things you can control are the width of the cone, how long the light shines, and you can rotate the lights and all that sort of stuff. If I click on light right here, I can make it visible. Let's try that again. I can play around with these two. So I'm going to go back into my little view here and see what that does. Pretty interesting. I don't like that I can see the cone here, so I think what I'll do is I'll try to put this light inside. Oops, select my light up here if you can't grab it, and just move that right there. Just going to play around with some of these parameters. That's kind of neat. I'm going to play with, instead of visible, I'm going to go inverse volumetric. Do a little live view here so I can see, pull that back. Let's see what would none look like. What if I increase that? Doesn't seem to work. So interesting. And then you can play around with other things like visibility, and you can add noise to this if you want to. So lots of stuff to play with. So you figure out where you want your lights to kind of hit your object. If you wanted to illuminate the whole thing, you'd pull it away. If you wanted to shine from within, you'd put it inside. So I'm actually liking kind of how this looks a little bit, because you can kind of see the whole inside of the jewel. So once you find something that you like, go ahead and copy and paste that. So Command or Control C and Command Control V. So now I have the second light. There's two of them there. And what I want to do is I want to kind of mirror this. I'm going to move this and then rotate 180 degrees, holding Shift. And now we have two lights that are kind of playing off each other. That's pretty cool. So you can start to see some of the effects coming off of there. It's kind of shining off of there a little bit. That's kind of cool. Some things that I would play with at this point are, maybe I copy paste that and make this one very, very different. And I pull this cone out. I could rotate this maybe it's pointing up a little bit. And maybe this one's more powerful. If I go into the general and make it 30. That's cool. I like the light coming off of that. That's going to be kind of neat. Eventually, we'll make this thing rotate. Okay, want to copy that. Control C, Control V. Rotate that. 180. Maybe make it come up as well. And it's up to you. Where does this light live? Maybe it's shining up like that. Looks cool to me. So you decide what that's going to look like. Okay, so add as many lights as you like. You should see your material, but it shouldn't get washed out from too bright of lights. So it's a fine balance, and it takes some time. Once you start getting some lights in there, you'll start to see things get a little more complex. So don't think that, oh, maybe I can move my lights in the front or below or above. I've had lights shining from above and below, and it looks really cool. So experiment with your lighting. Lighting is a whole discipline, so take some time with it and try to get it just where you like it, because it'll look like this in the end. We're going to add a few more things, and then our scene will be getting close to done. We're going to modify our shape a little bit. I'm going to zoom back into our scene, and it's starting to get pretty messy as far as layers go, and then all of these lines and everything. So one thing is I need to simplify this a little bit. Here's what you can do. These green check marks right here, you can paint them away to turn them off. You can also hide things by making these little red dots disappear. So if you click these little tiny red dots, we'll zoom in. If you make them red, these top ones, that's just going to hide it from the view. It's not going to stop them from rendering. So a couple of ways to simplify your scene a little bit. We need to turn those back on in the end. Next, we're going to make this jewel twist. There's all sorts of modifiers that you can try. This is the modifier menu. You can see I may have more than you, but there's many of them. There's bend, twist, there's taper, shear. So up to you to try some. I'm going to do a twist, and it puts this blue box around. And there's a twist object up here. What you need to do is you need to nest it into the object. I'm going to drag twist into jewel, and it will now be a child of jewel. So this is the parent-child sort of structure here. Next, twist, I need to fit it to parent. So if you ever see this button, fit it to parent, that's a good thing to do. And then we want to modify the twist. So if you have the twist selected, you can see the angle right here. I'm just going to click up, and you can see the blue box is twisting, and our artwork is twisting inside. If we had more segments, it would twist even better, but our faces are flat. We don't have a whole lot of segments, so it's twisting like this. If I render a picture of that, it's going to look pretty interesting. Let's see. I'm going to turn my lights on. There we go. Really, really fascinating. Like you can kind of see through it. That's going to look neat when we render it. I'm going to make my background a little darker while I'm here. Just random edit that I'm going to make. Very easy to do. Turn on my renderer. Yeah, maybe something like that. Okay. So that's modifiers and turning objects off and on for visibility and tweaking if needed. Let's animate, finally. We're ready to go. We have lights, we have our object, we have tweaked everything we can. Now we need this thing to move. And you can do anything you want to. You can animate anything you want to. So you'll start seeing these keyframes within the program, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I can animate anything. we're just going to keep it simple and animate the jewel. I want it to spin one time while we view this. So first, how much time are we going to render our video for? So let's say 60 frames. So I just want it to be about 60 frames long. So this is my timeline here, and I can click and scrub my little playhead down here. No animation's been entered yet. This bar right here lets you move the timeline back and forth, and you can also reduce what you can see. Right here is, this is the kind of the work area, 90 frames. We don't need 90, we need 60. So I'm going to type 60 right there. Now our work area is everything. Okay. Right. I want to animate rotation of the jewel, and I want it to rotate like this. Something that can help is to turn on auto keying right here. So if I put auto keying on, it should help me record. Otherwise, you can miss out on some keyframes and have to redo things. So that's kind of frustrating. All right, click on jewel. And now we have this section down here. If you are not on this little tab right here, click on coordinate or chord. You'll see there's position, there is scale, and there is rotation information. These little circles, these little radio buttons, are keyframes. So you'll start seeing these now that we've taken a look at them. And I want to rotate in the heading or H property. So first we need to add a keyframe, and we need to figure out where that keyframe goes. So probably at 0. We usually do that in After Effects. So I'm going to actually click this little button for rotation in the heading direction. I'm going to click that, and now we have a keyframe. If you look closely, you'll see a little blue square over here that says, okay, there's a keyframe there. All right, let's go forward to the very end, and I want this to rotate once, or 360 degrees, 360, and then you press enter, and there's a new keyframe. If you scrub, you can see that your jewel is rotating. Okay, it looks pretty good. Now we can also control the rate at which we animate. Right here, upper right, this layout is called Startup. I want you to go to the Animate option, and you'll see some different kind of looks. All the same stuff is here, it's just in a different way, but the timeline is very different. What I'd like to do is control the interpolation of the keyframes, like easing, but I don't want it to ease this time, and I'm like, where is that even found? It's found right here. If you press this F curve mode, you'll see this is the motion spline. I want this to be linear. So there's some presets over here. If you just click linear and you press play, that is going to be a perfect loop. It should. It's linear, 60 frames, turns once, and then it's going to repeat itself. That's the goal. Maybe we make an animated GIF by the end of this thing. Okay, so that is object animation. You can animate whatever you want to. You could also animate the twist if you wanted to. Let's take a look at the object. Under the angle, you could animate how much it twists. You could animate the lights, where they are in position. You could animate the position of the jewel, the size of it, the rotation of it. Up to you. I would just pick something simple so you have some success with it, but there we go. We have an animated jewel, and yeah, it's coming along nicely. Cameras are another object. They can be a little confusing in the way that they work, but let's try. So I'm in my perspective view, and I'm going to figure out where I want this to start my camera move. So you pick. You can be like looking up at it. You can be looking down at it. You can be close or far away. Right here, my this black area or this darker area will not be rendered. So it's only going to be this lighter area. So it's going to tell you where it's going to crop. So I'm going to pick right in the middle, get my grid to kind of be like right at the eye line. That looks pretty good to me. Maybe pan a little bit. So figure out where you want that to be. Then we're going to add a camera. And what it's going to do is it's going to put a camera in your scene. It's an object that has this view. So just make sure you get this right before you click on the camera. All you do is you click on camera. Not much change there. Some stuff over here, but we can see there's a camera now. This little button here, this little black target, tells you whether the camera is being viewed or not. Right now, the camera is not being viewed. When you click this button, now the camera is being viewed and it's active. So if you move, zoom, pan, rotate, you're moving the camera. That's the frustrating part about this. So please turn that off and then zoom out. You can see there's a camera there now. So I'm way zoomed out. What I want to do is I want to go back to that view that I had, and you do that by clicking this on again, and it's going to zoom right back into that camera view. If I click it off, it's going to go back to my kind of zoomed out view. What I'd like to do is I'd like to animate my camera moving on this blue axis. There's something confusing about this because camera, if I just move it on the Z axis, which is the blue, it's actually going to move diagonally. That's because the world axis and the object axis are different. If I click this little coordinate system button, you can see things change. This is the world axis and this is the object axis. So what I'll need to do is actually drag this blue arrow and put some keyframes down. So I'm going to grab my camera, make sure I'm on that, make sure that you have auto keyframing on, and we're going to enter a keyframe for all 3 position keys, just to be safe. Go forward to halfway through our animation, that's 30, and make a camera move. So I'm just going to pull this towards our object here, and there's an automatic keyframe. What I want to do now is look at the camera. Click on camera and drag your playhead forward and backward and make sure that that looks good. This jewel shouldn't go off the screen. Nothing else should happen. Okay. If you don't like something, like maybe you wanted the camera to go down a little bit, I could make the camera go down a touch. This is one way to do it. That looks better. So it would make sense to copy and paste this keyframe, but sometimes things don't make sense. So we're going to do this another way. I actually want to copy and paste my keyframe information right here. So on this keyframe, on frame number 1, this is the keyframe information right here. I'm going to click on X, zoom in there, click on Y, holding Shift and Z. They're highlighted, and I need to copy that information. Right click, copy. Go forward in time, and then I'm going to right click, paste. There's no keyframes yet. My camera has moved, if you notice, but I need to lock in that position. Now, if I scrub, starts there, goes in, and then comes back out. So it's a looping animation. If I want to see it, zoom into your camera. There you go. So that's all moving just right. And now we're ready to render our scene. We need to render our video now, and we got to set it up, of course, and tell it what to do and what files to make and how many frames to make and all that. So right here is all the render settings. So this little gear up here with the clapper kind of play icon. This will bring you to the render settings, and there's a few things we need to adjust. First, output. Determine the size that you want. We actually want this to be 1920 by 1080. So I'm going to change that 1920 by 1080. And the aspect ratio should change, but then change back. Resolution 72 works for me. Current frame is what's going to render. This right here will only render 1 frame. So we actually want to render all frames, which is through 60. We determined that earlier. Okay, so that's the range and the size and all that sort of stuff. Next is save. What do we want to save it as, and file name and all that, and where to save it to. So you guys got to pay attention to where you're doing that. You can't just blindly click OK. The file name is right here. So I'm going to click the triple dot and determine what it's going to be called. So I'm going to call this Jewel. Probably my name. It's a good name, something like that. And then hit save. And it's going to take on the path and the name that you've determined there. The type of format. What do we want? Do we want videos? Do we want pictures? You get all sorts of choices here. I want a video, and I can choose either a MOV or a MP4. If you have MP4, please choose that. And that's good enough. There's no other things that you need to worry about. Okay. So I'm going to close that up. And I'm going to tell it to render to picture viewer. That's the kind of the engine that runs and renders this whole thing. So once I press that, it's going to pop up another window. I'll show you here, and it's going to start rendering one frame at a time. This is going to take a little bit of time. This may take 60 minutes for your computer to render this. If we're having a hard time rendering things, we may need to adjust the size. You can see that the jewel itself takes quite a bit of time to render. That's because of all the reflection and refraction happening in there. But the background goes super fast. All those little squares are rendering that background, and it goes pretty fast. You can see your progress right here. I'm on frame 2. So I'm going to fast forward this, and you can kind of see the rendering process. And when we're done, we'll have a video to see and to see how it looks. And that's what I want you guys to turn in when you're done, is this final MP4 awesome 3D video that you just made. So here we go with the fast forwarding. All right, so completed rendering. It took quite a while. And here is the final rendering. If you press the little play button, it'll play back what it rendered. Or you can open the video file that you made. Here's another way to render it. We also, remember, are working from After Effects here. And if we come back here and we press a couple of buttons, it'll kind of show up and we can render it from here. So here's, if you want to do it this way. First of all, we need to go to Project Settings, Camera, Cinema 4D Camera, because we have a camera in our scene. And then the renderer should be current. So those two settings will make it look just like it does in Cinema 4D. And what if you want to do, we just want to render this little section. This is 60 frames. It's already set up for you. If you press O and then the letter N, and you can render this. It might take a while, and you can send it to the Adobe Media Encoder, which we've done before. You could make MP4 out of it if you want to. I'm going to take a little tangent here, and you know, there's all sorts of things we can do with this. I'm going to close this up. This is my video. This is what was made. That's pretty cool. I love it. What if I wanted to make a GIF out of it? So I'm going to open up a new tab. I'm going to go to Giphy. Also convert Gifs if you want to. Let's see. There's my login. I've created many GIFs, and I can upload my movie to Giphy. And then what it'll do is it'll make a infinitely looping GIF. So you could make a GIF through this, or you could also do it through the Adobe Media Encoder. It's also an option to export from there. So if you wanted a GIF, that's fine. If you want to just do a video file, totally fine as well. When you're done, it's going to look like this. And just look, it's a looping file. I would need to save this image. and download that. There's my GIF. It's going to look, it's going to stutter a little bit. It's going to be, it's going to have some texture to it because that's how they get the files down. But that's an option for you to turn in. So final file should look like something like this, where you have some materials, you have a modifier like twist, you have some animation of the object, so it's turning. You have animation of a camera, and you have some sort of background. So this is the final look. One more time. There you go. That's 3D animation.